The few cases of mid-air collisions in the 21st century have mostly happened because of miscommunications with air traffic control. High velocities in crowded skies, navigation errors, sudden changes of plans, or even lack of vision have also played a key role. On December 13, 2006, a series of errors almost led to the airborne collision of an Italian F-16 fighter and a commercial jet plane. Video and audio evidence taken from the pilot's F-16 aircraft revealed the close call that could have turned fatal, if not for the fighter plane's quick reaction. A mid-air collision, or MAC, is an aviation accident in which two or more aircraft get into incidental contact during flight. Although they rarely occur, they are not uncommon to aviators, especially those who lived through wars where aviation played a key role, such as World War II, the Korean War, or the Vietnam War. The first recorded collision between aircraft dates back to the 1910 Milan International Air Circuit. On October 3rd, French pilot René Thomas was flying the Antoinette 4, one of the earliest monoplane designs, during an aerial demonstration. It collided with a British Farman 3 biplane piloted by British Captain Bertram Dixon. Thomas hit the fireman in the rear, which led both aircraft to lose control and crash. Both pilots miraculously survived. Hundreds of incidents like this would occur in the following decades during air shows and demonstrations. As commercial airlines flourished in the years following World War II, the need to coordinate air traffic control in crowded areas led to the creation of the International Civil Aviation Organization, among other similar entities. Their main objective was to establish a universal system so that pilots could easily coordinate with local air traffic control authorities. Having a standard way to communicate would prevent incidents and allow aviators to share best practices. Based on signals emitted from aircraft transponders, traffic collision avoidance systems alert pilots of a potential collision with a nearby plane. These systems work well, but haven't been able to completely prevent air collisions. The military aircraft involved in the December 2016 incident were two Italian F-16 fighter jets of the 37th Stormo unit based in Trapani, Italy. In 2001, the Italian military promoted a competition for a fighter that could replace the old F-104 starfighters in the Italian Air Force. The F-16 fighter jets were selected in a lease deal brokered by the United States. The Italian Air Force struck a deal with Lockheed Martin to purchase 45,000 flying hours through 2004 and 2010. The deal included a fleet of 30 F-16A Falcon UPs, 3 F-16B Block 10s, and a single F-16A ADF air defense fighter aircraft. The deal was named Peace Caesar and was signed on March 15, 2001. The first aircraft were delivered in June 2003 at the Trapani Birgi Air Base. Engineers modified them with logos of Italy and the Stormo unit. On December 16, 2006, two F-16s from the 37th Stormo unit were returning to their home base in Trapani after conducting a military exercise. In the video, the Italian pilot is heard talking with Cyrano, a French airborne early warning and control system aircraft that cleared them to climb to flight level 360 for return to base. After thanking the French for the heads up, the pilots were handed over to Rome's military radar for further indications. The pilots repeatedly tried to establish contact with them to no avail. The F-16s continued to climb to flight level 360 when the wingman spotted something approaching from the opposite direction. What appeared to be a commercial jet came into view on their left side. The jets kept approaching, and right before colliding, the F-16 pilot reacted and performed a quick escape maneuver that prevented both aircraft from a mid-air crash. Experts claim that multiple errors led to the accident. One explanation is that Rome Air Control thought the F-16s were at flight level 320 instead of 360, and also that one of the F-16's transponders was not working correctly. Others have said that the commercial jet's traffic collision avoidance system was not working correctly because it did not detect both aircraft and kept its path. Regardless, such a close call highlighted the importance of visual attentiveness, despite all the technological gadgets that facilitate flight today. The source of the leaked video is unknown. As test pilot, Jason Clements was making sure that every setting on his F-16 Fighting Falcon was correct before taking off. He made an unusual move. Instead of putting on his seatbelt and preparing to fly, he suddenly stepped off the aircraft and left a GoPro camera mounted in front of his seat. However, this was no ordinary Falcon. Clements was actually launching a QF-16, one of Boeing and the Air Force's latest attempts at unmanned remote-piloted aircraft, and sought to capture the flight on camera. As the Fighting Falcon lifted off from Tyndall Air Force Base and into the skies, two other guard aircraft followed its every move. The QF-16 made its maiden unmanned flight in 2013, opening the door for future unmanned aerial targets for practice, but also, possibly, as the beginning of a new era in drones used as a war weapon. The Lockheed Martin F-16 Fighting Falcon is considered one of the most prolific fighter aircraft in the world. Originally designed as an air superiority day fighter, the Fighting Falcon evolved into a successful all-weather multi-role aircraft, completing over 13 million sorties and almost 20 million flight hours. The fighter was first introduced in 1978 and has over 3,000 models currently in operational service worldwide. The original Fighting Falcon was one of the first aircraft to be fitted with an onboard computer to help the pilot. Today, it is essentially impossible to find a modern fighter jet without any kind of computer assistance. Still, the US Air Force and Boeing have joined forces to take the concept of onboard computers even further by attempting to replace the pilot altogether. The QF-16 Full-Scale Aerial Target, or FSAT program, has been converting old Fighting Falcons into unmanned drones as far back as 2010. These modified F-16s are used in weapon system evaluation programs to assess, upgrade, or replace current air-to-air missiles while offering live missile training for combat air crews. During a given training exercise, the test missile launched at a target obtains the coordinates from a ground control station. In turn, the QF-16's computer software validates the data engagement and sends what it considers relevant, such as the distance and speed of the missile, to the ground station, which then determines the mission's success. Capable of operating in both manned and unmanned modes, the supersonic and reusable drone is equipped with state-of-the-art flight termination and visual augmentation systems in order to realistically replicate modern threats like the Russian Mikoyan MiG-29 or Sukhoi Su-27 fighters. Not having a person inside the cockpit opens the door to significant exploration opportunities for the developers, including the chance to test out radical-looking planes or even a lower price point, as these models don't have any of the standard safety systems required to keep a pilot safe. The QF-16 replaces the aging QF-4 remotely piloted aerial target, itself a modification of the Vietnam-era F-4 Phantom. According to developers, this newly developed model acts as a fourth-generation airborne target with adjustable settings to replicate all kinds of threats. The first mention of the project happened in July of 2007 during Industry Day, an event hosted by the Air Force's Air Armament Center for interested vendors. By March of 2010, the Department of Defense awarded Boeing the nearly $70 million multi-year contract for the initial engineering, manufacturing, and development of up to 126 QF-16s, with an initial delivery scheduled for 2014. After the first F-16 selected to be converted into an aerial target arrived from a boneyard in April of 2010, the engineers began a lengthy repair and upgrade process. The prototype QF-16 undertook its maiden flight in May of 2012. Then, 6 months later, the first finished model was sent over to the 82nd Aerial Target Squadron at the Tyndall Air Force Base to begin a series of tests. Although F-16 Fighting Falcon jets are usually spotted flying over the Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, Florida, something was different on September 19, 2013. For the first time ever, an F-16 took to the skies without a pilot. After Jason Clements performed all the standard pre-flight checks, he climbed out of the cockpit, locked the canopy from the outside, and left a GoPro camera inside to record the occurrence. Control was then turned over to 2 United States Air Force test pilots from the 82nd Aerial Target Squadron, both of whom sat in a control room on the opposite side of the base. After taking off at 3 p.m., the test pilots remotely flew the QF-16 for an hour, including taking off, performing several maneuvers, and pushing for supersonic speeds before returning to base. One of the simulated maneuvers included a barrel roll and a split S, a difficult move in which the QF-16 turned upside down before making a half loop to fly up in the opposite direction, a move commonly used in combat to evade missile lock-on. The aerial target aircraft was followed by 2 chase planes at all times. The accompanying jets contained equipment that would have allowed it to self-destruct in case of an emergency. Incidentally, the jet that was selected for the full-scale aerial target program had sat in an Arizona boneyard for almost 2 decades, but this day it conducted a successful unmanned flight, reaching a maximum altitude of 40,000 feet and a supersonic speed of Mach 1.47. According to Boeing engineers, the QF-16 succeeded at 7 g of acceleration, and was capable of carrying out maneuvers at 9G, an amount that would otherwise cause physical harm to a human pilot. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Inman, commander of the 82nd Aerial Target Squadron, commented on the test flight and stated that, quote, "It was a little different to see an F-16 take off without anyone in it, but it was a great flight all the way around. Now we have a mission-capable, highly sustainable, full-scale aerial target to take us into the future." Both the Boeing developers and the Air Force commanders praised the test's performance, with the project's chief engineer describing the landing as one of the most perfect he'd ever seen in his life. The milestone flight, which was caught on camera from the point of view of the non-existent human pilot, officially initiated a series of operational evaluations of the full-scale aerial target, including a live fire test at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. However, the first QF-16 was shot down during a Combat Archer Weapon System Evaluation Program exercise on July 19, 2017. And in 2020, 32 of the autonomous aircraft were used as targets in a long series of practice tests over the Gulf of Mexico, a rather unsentimental ending to one of the most well-known and celebrated fighters in United States history. Despite the project's success, several ethical questions surfaced regarding the use that these vehicles could be given, particularly if the autonomous drones are taken into warfare and equipped with weapons that can fire without physical human intervention. According to a spokesman for the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, an organization that seeks to preemptively ban lethal autonomous weapons, quote, "There's every reason to believe that these so-called targets could become a testbed for drone warfare." Boeing is still on contract with the Air Force and is committed to delivering up to 121 converted airframes, separated into 5 construction lots. In the near future, the data recovered from these self-flying fighter jets could transform aerial combat in missions like flying decoy routes to distract them from a manned aircraft operating in stealth mode. According to Michelle Hafers, director of the Testing and Training Division at Eglin Air Force Base, the QF-16 full-scale aerial targets are capable of representing actual scenarios of what America might face on the battlefield. Quote, "We don't know exactly how our weapons are going to work until we actually put it up against a bad guy, so we make these planes the bad guy. They make really good bad guys." A student pilot from the Arizona Air National Guard 152nd Fighter Squadron lost consciousness while flying his F-16 Fighting Falcon and faced an imminent collision. It's common for a novice pilot to be overburdened by the complexity of controls in modern aircraft. Combined with intense G-forces at high altitudes and speeds, it could lead to increased pressures that threaten the pilot's well-being. During a training practice in May of 2016, the National Guard pilot student made a high-speed maneuver and began nosediving into the ground. He was unconscious. Amidst alarming cries from his instructor, an innovative cutting-edge avoidance system kicked in and skillfully avoided a tragedy. According to U.S. Air Force official statistics on F-16 pilot fatalities, 26% of the incidents are due to controlled flight into terrain. This happens when an aircraft under the pilot's complete control inadvertently crashes into the ground. After 30 years of thorough research, a team effort between Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, the Air Force Research Laboratory, and NASA developed the Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System, or AUTO-GCAS. The system consists of complex collision avoidance and autonomous decision-making algorithms that use precise navigation, aircraft performance, and onboard digital data to determine if a ground collision is imminent. AUTO-GCAS is designed to prevent controlled flight into terrain mishaps by executing an automatic recovery procedure when the algorithm senses ground impact danger. The instant the system recognizes a sudden alteration in the aircraft's predicted travel trajectory, the AUTO-GCAS autopilot executes an automatic recovery. The maneuver consists of an immediate roll to upright and a nominal 5G pull until ground clearance is assured. The AUTO-GCAS technology was created to avoid deadly crashes and protect pilots from situations such as distractions, task saturation, forms of incapacitation, and unconsciousness. An Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcon was selected to flight test the program in 2009. The trial took place at the NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center in Edwards Air Force Base in California. Further testing with the 416th Flight Test Squadron's Fighting Falcons continued through 2013. The AUTO-GCAS technology saved a pilot's life on May 5, 2016, when a group of trainees from the Arizona Air National Guard's 152nd Fighter Squadron flew their F-16s over the southwestern United States. The footage shows how one of the student pilots succumbed to G-induced loss of consciousness without warning during a high-speed maneuver and began nosediving into the ground. Fainting due to gravitational force, also known as G-LOC, occurs when excessive G-forces drain blood away from the brain, depriving it of enough oxygen. Quote, "The next thing I remember is just waking up and hearing 'recover,'" the student pilot said. "It happened so fast. Usually everyone has been pulling Gs for a long time. Most people get tunnel vision that gradually comes in. That's what I always get. But on that day, I didn't get anything." After regaining consciousness and hearing the voice of his instructor, Major Luke O'Sullivan, the student opened his eyes and was confused for a split second, but soon realized that his jet was nearing the ground and acted swiftly. He recounted, quote, "Everything just came to me at the same time. I immediately started to pull up." The jet's F-16 Auto GCAS had already kicked into gear. The aircraft performed a roll-to-upright trick after sensing collision danger. Right after the pilot regained consciousness, he realized that the automatic maneuver had already taken over. He then regained control of the aircraft and managed to recover, avoiding an impact that could have cost him his life. The Auto GCAS system is currently operating in more than 600 U.S. Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcons. Flight testing in other models, such as the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II, began in 2018. In recognition of the revolutionary life-saving program, Lockheed Martin and the Air Force Research Laboratory received Aviation Week Laureate Awards in 2016 and 2019. After its official service introduction in 2013, the Auto GCAS has been credited with saving 10 pilots' lives, and it will continue to do so as it's implemented in more planes in the future. The avoidance technology is projected to save 34 aircraft, 25 pilots' lives, and $2.3 billion over the next 2 decades to the United States alone. According to Colonel Chris Keithley, 416th FLTS commander, quote, "This means their families didn't lose a husband, father, son, or brother. It also means they're able to serve their country another day. It's a huge win, and I can't overstate how meaningful it is." On a typical day in the middle of May 2019, California Highway Patrol Officer Chris Bohl was driving on his usual route on the hunt for speeding Californians. Used to his daily routine, Officer Bohl perfectly knew the ins and outs of his SUV's radar system. Thus, when the onboard system went off, despite not having any other car in sight, the patrolman decided to get out of his vehicle. Willing to find the source of the radar gun's activity, Bohl looked left and right at the desert stretch surrounding the highway. Suddenly, a powerful noise hummed from above, and it became clear that there was something cruising at a fast speed. In fact, what Bohl's radar gun kept alerting him of wasn't on the road at all, but in the sky. An F-16 Fighting Falcon was flying right overhead, streaking low and fast past the lonely path to the desert winter road, and it was all caught on camera. As California Highway Patrol Officer Chris Bohl noticed an aircraft flying towards his car while on patrol in May of 2019, he quickly managed to turn his phone on and record the F-16 flying by. Shortly after, footage of the incident was shared by the social media account of the California Highway Patrol Bishop Station, with credit to Officer Bohl, and the title, quote, "When the radar in your patrol car is going crazy, but you don't see any cars on the road, look up." The recording quickly went viral, and the incredible images garnered over 100,000 views in just a few days. The video shows a California Highway Patrol Ford Explorer SUV parked on a stretch of highway in a relatively flat basin with mountains to the west and east in the desert suburb of Bishop, California. As strong winds pound on the camera microphone, an F-16 fighter jet comes up to the vehicle from behind, then flies ahead and banks to follow the road, fading within seconds from the camera's sight and veering off to either the west or east. According to the highway patrol officer, he was puzzled when he noticed the radar was signaling speeding from an incoming vehicle. Still, all doubts were solved once the jet came into view. The General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon, officially introduced on August 17, 1978, is a single-engine, multi-role fighter aircraft. Originally designed by General Electric as an air superiority day fighter for the U.S. effort, the project evolved into one of the world's most successful all-weather multi-role aircraft. Amongst the aircraft's many features are a bubble canopy for improved visibility, the first use of a fly-by-wire control system, a control stick to control the maneuvering of the aircraft, and an internally installed M61 Vulcan cannon and 11 more locations for weapon mounting. While the F-16's official nickname is Fighting Falcon, Pilots and crews who have flown this aircraft often refer to it as Viper, due to its resemblance to both a Viper snake and to the Colonial Viper starfighter from Battlestar Galactica. In addition to its active duty in the U.S. Air Force, other air forces around the globe, and Air Force Reserve Command and Air National Guard units, the Fighting Falcon is also used by the Thunderbirds aerial demonstration team, and even by the Navy. According to Lockheed Martin, the F-16 Fighting Falcon's capabilities allow for better partnerships with allies, stating that the aircraft, quote, has been proving its effectiveness for decades and continues to remain the best value among fourth-generation jets for its capabilities and affordable life cycle costs. In over 40 years of service in Allied missions, more than 4,600 Fighting Falcons have flown over 13 million sorties and counting, amassing an estimated 19.5 million flight hours. Operators both past and present include Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, Thailand, Poland, Romania, and many others. The F-16 has participated in numerous armed conflicts, the majority of them in the Middle East. The first use in combat of the iconic aircraft occurred during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, where both the Air Force Reserve and the Air National Guard flew the aircraft in a United States-led coalition of dozens of countries against Iraq in response to the country's invasion and subsequent annexation of Kuwait. In addition, 2 unarmed Fighting Falcons were launched to attempt to ram the United Airlines Flight 93 that was trying to reach Washington, D.C. on September 11, 2001. However, Flight 93 was brought down by the passengers before the F-16s, and the jets were retasked to patrol the local airspace, later escorting Air Force One back to Washington and guarding President George W. Bush. After that, the Fighting Falcon became a staple aircraft in the global war on terrorism. While initial rumors marked the cease of the use of the F-16 in the mid-2020s, U.S. Air Force officials recently announced that the branch will continue to operate the jet for 2 more decades, and a developing project called the F-16 Service Life Extension Program will keep the iconic jet flying until nearly 2050. The program, which combines a dozen structural modifications into one repeatable package, will extend the lifetime of selected aircraft to 12,000 flying hours. Although the Fighting Falcon can fly at speeds greater than twice the speed of sound, it is unlikely that the fighter in the video taken in May of 2019 was cruising that fast. According to Business Insider, low-altitude flybys occur regularly in the area where the video was taken, and these incidents are often picked up by radar. Officer Bowles' radar registered up to 250 miles per hour at one point, and according to the officer, several F-16s flew past his parked spot repeatedly while he was out on the deserted road. In a subsequent interview, another California Highway Patrol officer at the Bishop Station stated that his radar system once recorded over 300 miles per hour. Still, because of the camera's position, either Bowles was a lucky man to witness the maneuver on the otherwise empty road, where this wasn't the jet's first pass. Based on how low the aircraft flew over Officer Bowles' car, it is said that Bowles most likely knew where to aim the lens to catch the fighter flying by his Ford Explorer, which also suggests that the pilot knew exactly what they were doing as they looped around for a low flyby. Whether the pilot was hoping to make the officer's day or scare him, it's hard to tell from the footage alone. Also, because of the video's quality, the tailcode on the F-16 is unreadable, making it impossible to correctly determine where it's from. According to Popular Mechanics, the most likely options are either the Arizona Naval Guard or the Hill Air Force Base in Utah, due to Bishop's location. Currently, Hill Air Force Base's 2 resident F-16 fighter wings are in the transitioning process to replace them with the F-35A Joint Strike Fighter. However, the base continues to be a hub for Fighting Falcon upgrades and repair work, namely the aforementioned F-16 Service Life Extension Program. Whether it was fate, coincidence, or done on purpose, Officer Bowles' recording of the mighty F-16 Fighting Falcon flying low and fast was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The largest F-16 operation in history had failed. The overwhelming anti-air defenses and the impenetrable smokescreens deployed around Baghdad had rendered the American efforts futile, forcing them to return home with little results. Amid the turmoil of the retreat, Major Emmett Tullia was left behind and desperately tried to correct his course as he faced an unrelenting storm of anti-aircraft fire. The cockpit camera on his F-16 would record the events about to unfold. Tullia suddenly identified a SAM-guided missile dashing towards his position and tried to deploy flares, but the system didn't respond. He then reported the inbound missile through the radio as he feverishly performed a series of daring high-G maneuvers at breakneck speed. The projectile zoomed so closely that the American pilot could hear the missile's buzzing motor. The warhead detonated away from the pilot, but before he was able to catch his breath, Tullia frantically turned and dived in a chain of risky evasion maneuvers, which exerted an unspeakable amount of stress on his body. The man survived, but was evidently shaken, as he reported his status through the radio. But he was not out of the woods yet. Soon, 4 other SAM missiles targeted his aircraft. The mentally and physically exhausted pilot would have to push his body to the limits if he wanted to survive the ordeal. Often overshadowed by more recent regional conflicts, Operation Desert Storm was a massive and ambitious endeavor that paved the way for America's interventionism in the Middle East. Iraqi forces were abysmally outclassed by the coalition forces and their state-of-the-art wartime technology, but this didn't mean they were defenseless. In fact, by the time the conflict scale reached its boiling point in January of 1991, Baghdad was the most fortified city in the world. The SAM defenses around the capital were so significant that the coalition was forced to limit its attacks by merely using F-117 Nighthawks, which could evade enemy detection, or long-range cruise missiles, which didn't risk the lives of Allied pilots. However, the approach yielded lacking results. After months of aerial strikes, the coalition could not destroy the Al-Tuwaita nuclear research complex, the centerpiece of Saddam Hussein's defiant nuclear program. As such, the Allied forces concocted Package Q Strike, a massive air raid that would use conventional aircraft to deal as much damage as possible to the nuclear plant, while probing the extent of the aerial defenses posted around and inside the Iraqi capital. On January 19, 1991, 56 American F-16 warplanes, 6 F-4s, 14 F-15Cs, and 2 EF-111s took off from bases in Qatar and southern Saudi Arabia towards a specified rendezvous point in northern Saudi Arabia, where they would meet with 6 tanker aircraft tasked with refueling the fighters. The refueling process was painfully slow, and the last 4 aircraft to refuel were sent back to Qatar as they had fallen behind schedule. Nevertheless, with 52 F-16s, the sortie was the largest F-16 operation in history. But the brave American pilots were in for a brutal surprise. As the formation made it to the region around Baghdad, they were met by thousands of anti-air guns. Fortunately, the fighters were flying too high to be severely damaged by the onslaught, but the situation quickly grew chaotic. On the ground, Iraqi forces deployed a massive network of smokescreens around the nuclear complex and other valuable assets in the area. The pilots navigated toward their strike targets, but it was almost impossible to attack with reliable precision. Soon, the F-16 formations were attacked by surface-to-air guided missiles, capable of reaching much higher altitudes and posing a real threat to the dozens of coalition aircraft. The F-16s then dropped their payloads, but without knowing if they had found their targets. Overwhelmed by the fierce defenses, the formations turned around and hurried south. Several F-16s were hit by enemy fire and reported as damaged, but as the bulk of the force retired from the area, no U.S. aircraft had been shot down. Arriving later than intended, Major Emmett Tullia, identifying as Stroke 3, dived from the clouds and approached the oil refinery he had been tasked with striking. The pilot didn't realize that he was alone, and soon all the anti-air defenses were targeting his F-16. Before he could unleash his payload, he detected an S-75 Dvina Soviet-made missile approaching his position and announced over the radio, quote, "Stroke 3 defending SA-2. He then deployed his chaff, but it didn't appear to affect the missile. Footage captured by the pilot's cockpit camera shows the intensity of the maneuvers taken by the bold airman to avoid the zooming projectile. The images show how the pilot executes a series of drastic high-G turns, one after another, in a desperate attempt to dodge the missile in the last second before it strikes. The projectile then scrapes by and detonates at a safe distance. Talia remains calm and reports his status over the radio. However, he is now alone and flying over the most fortified city on Earth. Determined to accomplish his mission, he flies toward the oil refinery and drops his two 2,000-pound bombs over the target. As he turns to start his trip back to base, his F-16 begins to sound the alarm of an incoming missile. Over the radio, a voice yells at him, quote, "Stroke 3, brake right, brake right." Instincts take over, and he veers ferociously to the right in a sharp turn that exerts an unspeakable force on his body. As he moves, 3 SA-3 missiles pass by so close that he can hear the buzzing sound of their motors. His wingman, Major Jeffrey S. Tice, had just saved his life. Several pilots call through the radio, desperately trying to learn if Talia is okay. After several seconds, he finally answers, informing them that he is egressing from the area. As he recovers himself, another alarm echoes inside his cockpit, and he yells, quote, "SA-6, stroke 3, defending 6. Another series of high-G maneuvers ensue, and despite his intense efforts, the missile doesn't lose its target and continues to dash ominously toward Talia. A last frantic turn finally deceives the missile, which explodes dangerously close to the F-16, but miraculously avoids any damage. With no time to catch his breath, Talia screams, quote, "There's another one, stroke 3, defending again." By now, Talia's aircraft has lost so much speed and altitude that he has no choice but to dive drastically to gain escape speed. As the aircraft swoops down, it comes within range of the anti-aircraft batteries on the ground, unleashing a firestorm upon the shattered pilot and his warplane. Fortunately, the pursuing missile suddenly loses its target and plummets inertly into the ground. Talia then climbs quickly to avoid anti-aircraft fire and moves south. As the footage ends, the man and his warplane are unscathed. He has just survived the impossible. The overall operation was a failure, with the strikes dealing only minor damage to the Alta Huayta nuclear research facility. The mission also cost the Coalition 2 F-16s that were lost on the way back to base after being damaged during the battle. But despite the disappointing results, no one could deny Major Emmett Talia's incredible and legendary feat, especially as it was recorded by his cockpit camera for the world to see. The F-16 Fighting Falcon is one of the fastest and most capable jet fighters of the past decades, partly due to its immensely powerful engine, which can produce over 30,000 pounds of thrust and catapult the aircraft to Mach 2 speeds. So much power requires special maintenance to ensure the engines always operate to their full potential, and they are continually taken to specialized facilities for inspections and repairs. Fortunately for air crews, the process for removing, dismantling, and inspecting an F-16 does not require the use of intricate instruments, and U.S. Air Force footage shows the process to take the engine from the aircraft in detail. Once removed, an F-16 engine is taken to a specialized facility for meticulous testing. These facilities are so loud that airmen working inside them have to wear special protection, as the engines are tested at almost 85% of their maximum power. Ironically, they're called hush houses. But testing at so much capacity can also bring unexpected circumstances, and the airmen must be acutely aware of plenty of hazards that surround them. The General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon is a compact, multi-role fighter aircraft that is highly maneuverable and has continually proven its worth during dogfights in air-to-air combats and air-to-surface attacks. The Falcon has rightfully earned its second nickname, the Viper, for its agility and strong resemblance to the audacious snake, known for striking its prey when it least expects it. Over 4,700 F-16 Fighting Falcons have been built since its introduction in 1976, and their astonishing performance and relatively low cost have made them the fighter aircraft of choice for the United States and many of its allies. Some of the aircraft's main features include its frameless bubble canopy, side-mounted control stick, relaxed static stability or fly-by-wire flight control system, and sophisticated ejection system. Most impressively, it is renowned for its devastating M61 Vulcan cannon and its capability to mount additional weapons in 11 different locations. When the single-engined F-16 Viper was first envisioned by General Dynamics, the power plant selected was a Pratt & Whitney F100 PW200 afterburning fanjet, or turbofan, which was a modified version of the F-15's engine. This successful engine was rated at almost 24,000 pounds of thrust. Nevertheless, the transition to the F-16 was not an easy one. The revamped F100 PW200 engine was prone to rollbacks and compressor stalls, and testing demonstrated that the thrust would suddenly go idle for no apparent reason. Regardless, the first F-16s were rolled out with that engine, and the USAF ordered all the fighters to be operated within dead-stick landing distance of bases, which is when an aircraft loses all its propulsive power and is forced to land. However, the F-16s were able to operate as expected only when the engines were upgraded with the Operational Capability Upgrade, or OCU. This system introduced a digital electronic engine control unit that significantly reduced stall occurrences and improved reliability. The upgraded F100 PW220E engine was introduced in 1997 after the USAF's alternate fighter engine program, which marked General Electric's entry as an engine provider for the F-16. In addition, the company also introduced the F110 GE100 turbofan. The engine was initially limited to 25,735 pounds of thrust. Still, the use of the Modular Common Inlet Duct, or MCID, allowed it to achieve over 29,000. A numerical system was established to mark the difference between F-16s equipped with different engines. For example, all the blocks ending in 0, such as Block 30, were powered by a General Electric engine. In contrast, the blocks ending in 2, like Block 32, were fitted with Pratt & Whitney engines. If the F-16 engines were not already powerful enough, the IPE, or Increased Performance Engine Program, made both engines more effective and faster. The F100 PW229 engine's performance on the Block 52 eventually increased to an impressive 29,160 pounds of thrust, while the Block 50 used an F110 GE129 engine and reached 28,590 pounds. What's more, the latest engine iterations currently used by the US and other allies can reach a maximum thrust of over 32,500 pounds, and such powerful engines need to receive regular maintenance to prevent even the slightest malfunctions, as they can prove fatal during a flight. The General Electric F110 engine currently powers almost 85% of the F-16s employed by the US Air Force. However, an F-16 must undergo a thorough inspection every 300 flights. Air Force footage shows how pilots remove the powerful engine from the aircraft without any issues or the assistance of ladders or stands. 80% of the access panels are within reach of the airmen, who can be seen pulling out the engine without complicated maneuvers. A phase inspection can last up to 15 working days and goes through almost 120 separate work cards to check that everything is ready to go. Usually, 10-person crews work on 2 shifts for a week during an active inspection. In addition, there are over 340 individual inspection steps carried out by the maintenance teams. The footage shows how the crews inspect and depanel the jet for specific checkups. The primary purpose of dismantling the engine is to identify the slightest discrepancies so that they can be immediately fixed. Electrical equipment, fuel cells, and other critical components are also checked to find any possible malfunctions. Then, if the required parts are not available, they are ordered from different suppliers. In an interview with Sergeant Adrienne Wilson in October of 2009, Senior Master Sergeant Stephen J. Eade, the 113th MXS Propulsion Element Supervisor, said, quote, "During engine tests, we monitor parameters such as fan and core speed, engine vibration for the fan, compressor and turbine rotors, torque motors on various operating components installed on the engine, oil pressure, and oil temperature, just to name a few." Finally, the specialized crews look at engine parameters that Air Force pilots will never see, but that are part of the overall process to comply with the requirements of a safe flight. One of the most prominent locations where F-16 engines are inspected and tested is Joint Base Andrews, where the District of Columbia Air National Guard 113th Maintenance Squadron has a facility dubbed the Hush House. This name is used to describe the engine test cell facility, which is anything but silent. Although the soundproof structures ensure that the decibels from roaring engines are hardly noticeable from the outside, the sound is at another level on the inside of the facility, for engines often run at full volume afterburner during testing. Sergeant Nina Brown from the 56th Fighter Wing Public Affairs said, quote, "It's called a hush house because it's a noise suppression system. It gives us the capabilities to test engines 24 hours a day without disturbing the local community." Hush houses are the last stop before an engine goes back into an F-16. Once the engines are inspected and fixed, they're taken to a trim pad, where the crews perform high-powered aircraft runs above 85% of the engine's rated capacity. A trim pad is a concrete pad with a specialized hold backplate installed in the foundation, and the footage shows how an F-16 engine is slowly turned on before the testing. Footage taken at the Atlantic City Air National Guard Base in Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, in January 2017 gives a glimpse of the facility and how an F-16 engine is tested. Producing over 30,000 pounds of static thrust during afterburner operations is extremely loud, and the crews must use specialized ear gear to prevent injuries. While an engine is being tested, facility operators oversee several parameters in control panel monitors and physically check the engine for leaks or possible malfunctions. Besides the deafening noise inside the hush house, the workers also have to be careful about several hazards that can harm them. During an interview with the U.S. Air Force District of Washington, Sergeant Timothy Shiley said, quote, "There are so many moving parts internally that could easily come apart. Fuel and oil could spray on you. When we run engines on the test stand, we're on the sides, top and bottom, looking at the engine, and we have to have constant communication to make sure everyone knows what the other is doing at all times. If precautions are not taken, things can go wrong very quickly, and there have been reports of aircraft that have gone loose during high-powered runs and have caused internal damage to the infrastructure. On other occasions, airmen have been sucked into jet engines and have only survived thanks to their helmets or equipment getting stuck into the blades before them. Depending on the engine or the specific guidelines, a test can take as little as 15 minutes or extend to more than 5 days to approve for flight. Still, the crews are always ready for unpleasant surprises with each new engine that arrives for testing and maintenance, and they know each motor is different and that the routine is not always the same. As Aircraft Run Program Manager Sergeant Matthew S. Norval concluded about the crew's importance, quote, "We take a tremendous amount of pride in the product we put out, as we realize the severity of any mistake we could make could be detrimental in the loss of equipment, aircraft, or loss of life."